Welcome to the education stage in Hall 4.2 of the Frankfurt Book Fair. My name is Carl Robinson, and I'm Head of Consulting at ICSIS, a Copyright Clearance Centre subsidiary based in London. CCC is all about advancing copyright, accelerating knowledge, and powering innovation. The acquisition of ICSIS in 2016 allows us to provide services that help accelerate digital transformation, help organizations reinvent themselves, so that they can drive new revenue and speed time to market. And we've done this countless times with publishers such as DK and Pearson, Wiley and Cengage. I've been in publishing for over 25 years now, and in my role at CCC, I try to help clients articulate the pain they're going through so that we can help work out how to solve that pain for them. And in this new digitally driven world, that's ever increasingly ever important. And then I, with my colleague Renee, help them find solutions to that pain. As I say, I'm joined by my good friend and colleague Renee Swank. Renee is a senior director at CCC with a wealth of experience in publishing and content and knowledge management. And she aims to help clients transform their business to support new digital-first and content-driven enrichment processes. So, Renee, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Can you...
Publishers have long dreamed of quickly and easily repurposing their lists for markets around the world. Transforming content, however, is no simple task. Some intelligence is required. I'd like to think that I'm displaying some of that right now, but I'm not sure. Dr. Alex Wisner-Gross, a fellow at the Institute for Applied Computational Science at Harvard University, has defined intelligence as a force to maximize future freedom of action. Intelligent content, then, I think, strives to maximize its potential for the futures ahead, both known and unknown. The earlier that content is embedded with some intelligence, the more freedom of action we will have as publishers when it comes to the future. So today, between us, we want to share with you some of our learning and experience from working with publishers to help them reach that nirvana of intelligent content. Why get on the road? What are the challenges? What's the journey? It's clear from our experience, and you can see some shouting from outside here with consumers, it's clear from our experience that consumers are demanding more from the content that they're reading and that they get from us as publishers. They expect personalized content, content that is increasingly relevant to them and their field. They expect to find answers from the vast data sets and knowledge and intelligence that's out there, often starting from different points as well, so they're accessing this intelligence differently. And finding a way to navigate that massive data is a big problem, we find. And they want up-to-date content, often even synced in real time to current events and to current trends and so on, so to help them with their field of study. I think, Renee, you'd probably agree with that. I mean, I don't know whether you're seeing, what are publishers doing to kind of deal with all of this, or what are they faced with?
Yeah, absolutely. I very much agree. And it's not just the external demands that you just talked about. It's internal users that also need to do things with content. They're creating content, reviewing it, acquiring it, curating it, updating it, publishing it. They're doing all this with the content, but it's in different silos, and they have inefficient workflows, is the mess you see above. They're looking at all of this content that's in different repositories, and they don't know where their content is. Where is it? They can't find the content that's in their own organization. The content often moves between people just with email attachments, or importing and exporting out of one system into another. And you don't know which one is the right version. So when you need to update, what is the right single source of truth for an asset? The content is not easily repurposable in lots of different contexts. In order to do that, it's often duplicated again in different contexts of different products. So Carl, you asked earlier what needs to change, and what I've seen is that publishers need to really evolve their content strategies, and first and foremost, they need to think about their storage. Instead of multiple silos, bringing into a single place where content is stored, and that's really the foundation to intelligent content, is breaking those silos. And then also providing mechanisms for teams that might be globally distributed to collaborate in clever ways. to be able to create their content collaboratively, review their content, assemble their content into new products. Also a key, I think, in a content strategy is to be able to granularize your content, so it's at a very small chunk. And that really creates the agility for reuse and repurposing the content and being able to maximize its value in lots of different contexts. And last, and I'm going to actually talk about this a little bit more later, is around enrichment of content with metadata. So that's really key to making content intelligent because it allows it to be searched and discovered. And you may not even know that you have this content, but it can be brought to you in relevant ways.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think that's really what's key to intelligent content, but really, thinking about what's the point of intelligent content? What's it bringing?
Yeah.
What's the big deal about intelligent content? So maybe you can speak a little bit about that.
It's interesting you talked about discovery there. I often, and people talk about search quite a lot, and they say they're trying to find this content, but discovery is something entirely different. I think is more powerful. I like to think of it as a bit like searching for a photograph you remember you had in an attic, and then finding loads of photographs you don't remember you had, but are really relevant to you at the time. So that's the power of discovery, I think, rather than search. But
exactly.
And that's really what we're talking about with intelligent content. Is a kind of bunch of capabilities. All too often in the work that you and I both do with publishers is we talk to them and they come to us and say we want a system to do X or a system to do Y. And we try to push back an awful lot and ask the question, that's great, thank you for telling us that, but what do you actually want to do? What are you trying to achieve? And I think that line of questioning more often opens up the answer about we're trying to have this capability. And so I prefer when publishers come to me and say, help me solve this problem or help me have that capability, rather than telling me about a bunch of requirements that they want us to meet. So that's my rant over. Come to me with problems and we'll help you solve them. Don't come to me with requirements. But the power of intelligent content, I think, is all about the capabilities, about the relationships between pieces of content and the data. What holds that content together? Why is one piece of content related to another piece of content? Or what does that relationship tell you? And even that relationship is meaning in itself. You can infer meaning from the fact that two pieces of content are related to each other. And that provides you content insight and intelligence. We talked earlier on about CCC is about advancing knowledge, accelerating knowledge, and that knowledge comes from inferred meaning between pieces of content, I think. So that's a really important piece because that then helps those consumers find what they're looking for. It helps them interrogate that data set so they're getting the answers that they require, even from meaning that isn't in the content itself. It's in between the content. So that's a really critical capability for the future. And we talked about the ability to repurpose and reuse content as well. And I mentioned maximizing freedom of action, future freedom of action in my introduction. And I think that's another big capability that we need to get, that sort of content agility and reuse, as well as content insight. And then there's personalization. We talked consumers ever wanting more and more personalization. And again, that's a capability that must be there, I think, and to call it intelligent content. And that personalization can tell you a lot of different things as well. So what are people looking for? What are they trying to combine? And that's really important information. What are they looking for? But then it's even more important to find out what did they not find. So what are you not providing for consumers that you should be providing? So that intelligence is also useful and can help with commissioning and content creation. So that's, I think, the direction we're heading in, the signpost there. What about the sequence of events? I mean, you and I have talked to a lot of publishers in time. So what's the best way of working these things? Or what's the road to intelligent content in your view? Yeah,
so when we work with publisher clients, and we've seen that a typical road to digital transformation, when there's a destination of intelligent content, there's really a lot of distinct milestones along that journey. First, there's simply just digitization, getting that print products and just making those available online. And just, it could be as simple as PDF with a print, with a paper behind glass type of experience. So very simple, basic digitization. A second milestone is simply taking that and making those available on a tablet or a mobile device. So just creating some responsive designs, but it's still the same product, but a bit better experience than paper behind glass. So that really gets us to milestone 2. And up to this point, we really haven't changed that upfront editorial process. It's still very print-based workflow, and then it may be dealing with the digital transformation at the end of the process.
And publishers could actually just stop at that point, I guess, couldn't
actually,
they?
it's actually a lot where we start with the client is they've made it this far in the journey, but they're kind of stuck in taking it to the next steps. So the third milestone in that digital transformation journey is to make content more discoverable by maybe adding some basic metadata to it, maybe classifying it with some taxonomy, and that really improves discoverability of the content maybe on the web platforms and things like that. So that is another place where we often start with our journeys with our clients to sort of helping them transform to more intelligent content capabilities. The fourth milestone is a bit more advanced and tricky, but it's the concept of single source publishing, where there can be that content that is stored once, but can be pushed to multiple channels like web and print from a single content source. The trick in that is that it needs to be with more agnostic formats, format agnostic formats like XHTML or XML, that it can exist once and then being delivered to both web and print from that single source. So that's the concept of single source publishing, a bit more challenging, and there's often content migration that's required to get the content to that stage and being able to support that kind of capability. But the interesting thing is that a lot of companies are still at that point working with monolithic documents, which brings me to the fifth and the sixth milestone, which is really where transformation of a business and a publishing process or content supply chain is starting to happen. The fifth milestone is really where we start to granularize the content and start working with content as individual objects that can be enriched and mix and matched in different contexts and different products, which really starts to leverage and create maximum value for content. Creating that single source of truth, not just for multiple channels, but also that content can exist in multiple products. So that gives a lot of new product development opportunities as well by leveraging maybe some existing content, being able to create new products out of existing content, and even some efficiencies around translations or updating, because if it's updated once, it can be updated in multiple contexts and multiple products. That's a big, impactful capability. And the last really final milestone along this journey is getting to intelligent content, and that really is where we are taking and not just having chunks of content, but enriched chunks of content. So,
that's all to do with, I think, this semantic enrichment. I mean, we have endless conversations about semantic enrichment. They're fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. So what are we talking about when we're talking about semantic enrichment? And that really is about giving data value by assigning meaning to it. And machines can use that to do different things, like what you were talking about earlier, Carl, with it's having that enrichment that could drive personalization and other kinds of capabilities that might be exposed on a web platform. And that can be done by adding rich metadata to granular assets. It could be creating asset-to-asset relationships. So rather than having assets just being individual objects, start to relate them together and describe why they are related together. What's the meaning? Why are these things interrelated? And even identifying important things within the content itself, within the words, maybe within a frame of a video about what that is. So those are the kinds of things I'm talking about, and having that in semantic enrichment and getting it right is really the challenging thing. And I know you know that this is a really tricky thing.
Oh yeah, it's very, very tricky. I mean, when it comes to metadata, I think it can be a bit of a minefield, I found. And I've also, in my time, met with some surprising comments. So a few years ago, I was talking with a publisher client who challenged me to my face. I think you were there, actually.
Yeah.
So prove to me that metadata has anything to do with money. He said, because I don't see the link between metadata and money. And it's actually quite hard to do, when somebody challenges you like that. And then this same client, not so long ago, I discovered is having a challenge where their consumers can't find their content on their website because their metadata isn't correct. And they're having to rethink their entire approach to metadata. As a result, those consumers are going to other publishers where they can find content. So is there a direct link between metadata and money? Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm glad I have that story now because I can now answer that question if anybody ever challenges me. You can lose money if you get this wrong. And I think what we often see in our consulting engagements, an awful lot, is that we see messy data or confused metadata. It's often ambiguous or uncontrolled. I mean, is it David Beckham, D. Beckham, Beckham, D? Is that Beckham D related to Brooklyn Beckham, and so on and so on. It's just very confused, very ambiguous. And sometimes we have to spend time disambiguating that metadata. Even more, that has that direct impact on the delivery channels to consumers. If that messy metadata is just produces messy search results, then you're just not going to find the content that you want as a consumer. And as a publisher, you're letting people down. We've all had that experience of trying to search for something and getting messy results and just getting confused and maybe picking up an encyclopedia instead of Google for a change. But Google's much better at it than we are. But I think this messy enrichment is really to blame for everything we're talking about. And this is where you're going here. And I think you coined for us a phrase, I think it was the 3 C's of metadata, which has nothing to do with CCC. It was entirely coincidental. But the 3 C's of metadata are up there. Consistency, yep. Completeness, and correctness. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I think there's a perception that there's more enrichment must mean it's better, and actually it's more enrichment may not be better, less may be more. It's really about in your content strategy making sure that you get the content complete, correct, and consistent, because it must be predictable in order for the delivery of some of the capabilities that you talked about with personalization and things like that. The metadata, the underlying metadata has to be complete. You have to make sure you have the right amount of metadata, the correct metadata, knowing what's mandatory, what's optional, and you need to define what is complete about your metadata. And for correctness, it's really important to establish governance and ways to measure quality about your metadata so that it's consistent and always conforming to these quality standards over time. And finally, find a way to consistently apply metadata across all of your content, and ideally in an automated way, because that will also not only be more efficient, but also help with consistency. So, to do that, really, Carl, you're on your way to getting to intelligent content.
So, you've probably discerned the theme already, road to intelligent content. We've got signposts, we've got cars, and so on, and really, in the race to intelligent content, you can be a winner. I think the opportunity is to be the winner. And that opportunity is really based upon all of that, pulling all of this together. It's about understanding the vision and power of getting on that road to intelligent content. Why is it important? Get your content into shape with the right enrichment and the right tools. Get it into one place to maximize your investment in that content and maximize your future freedom of action. That's a phrase I really like coming back to. Just having that intelligent content gives you so much more capability. But for some, being in the winning team can be a bit scary. And I found that print mindset is still very much a part of publishing these days. There's still print thinking, print design-led thinking. That's the lens through which an awful lot of publishers are still commissioning their content. And that is impacting the decisions around how that content gets created, such as, how does it need to fit onto a page? Or what's the word count here? And I think once you're released from that, then you really are in a position to drive ahead very fast and get to the winner's enclosure, one hopes. Michael Cairns on the Book Industry Study Group website wrote back in August that publishing, I'm quoting here, publishing does not see investment in technology to be strategic or value enhancing. And he thinks that perspective is a mistake, he said. And I tend to agree that print thinking, that thinking around is stunting, giving you stunted growth opportunities. I think that's what he said. I'm just looking at my notes here. The choice then I think is quite simple. Choose to take charge of the content, get benefit, or don't, and watch others pass you by and win. an awful lot of digital transformations, according to Michael Gale and Chris Ahrens in their book, The Digital Helix, fail. 84% of digital transformation efforts in most companies fail. And I think you and I, we've talked about this a bit, and I think we came up with this idea that actually the reason why they fail is because people only pay attention to that technology piece. And all too often we need to be thinking about the impact on people, on process, technology, yes, and content. And those four pieces together are what will make a successful digital transformation. And we've seen that happen. And that is where you're going to get the benefit, I think, is paying attention to those four areas. So technology, to go back to that point, sure, invest in technology. But it's only a tool in the same way in our theme that a car is just a vehicle. You still need a driver, you still need a route map, and you still need a reason to get from A to B. Otherwise, there's just no point in starting on that road. So don't forget people, don't forget processes, and don't forget getting your content right. Getting that intelligent content is going to be helping you get there. And yesterday I was at the Markets Conference, and Charlie Redmayne, who gave me the advice about wearing a white shirt if you're under hot lights, which is really useful, he said, CEO of HarperCollins, Charlie Redmayne, said, and I'm quoting, I think I got it more or less right, he said, there are more people buying and interacting with books across more formats and more channels than ever before. We, as publishers, have an opportunity to deliver content where they want it, how they want it, and on a global scale. The successful publisher will be doing just that. So Renee and I would say to you as we close, choose to be a successful publisher by getting on that road to intelligent content. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
We do have some time for some questions if anybody wants to. I don't know if we have any microphones out here, but
one of the things you mentioned about content was the personalization element of it. And you referred to being able to make inferences and links between one piece of content and another by using metadata. Is there any thought in this side of it to actually taking the user's personal context, as I mean from other things outside of the content, that would then give rise to how you might show or what you might show to that user, depending as they go through their kind of maybe researcher journey or user journey? And the second part to that question would be, in my head, there's implications there around personal data and all of that kind of stuff. What kind of problems or challenges do you think a publisher might face if they were to go down that kind of route?
Do you want to take that one, or you want me to take it?
you could take it.
Okay, so the first part. I think that you can put a lot of metadata and enrichment in the content and the type, and there's actually things that are influencing what might drive the personalization from that. So it might be their location, it might be their role. So it's a marrying of maybe what they're doing with the how they come into the data that might affect the personalization, the role that they're coming into the data, but it's still looking at that underlying metadata to map what is actually shown. And it could be actually inferred, may not be direct metadata, but might be things that might be inferred from the metadata. So lots of capabilities that you can derive from the context and impose that on the data itself as they're experiencing the content. So the second part of the question was what is the challenges they face?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the or two of the things you mentioned there, I would define as kind of
could you hold the microphone a little closer?
Personal data, sorry.
Yeah.
So geolocation, for example, role, so you provided that information. So I'm just wondering, it's almost as if in my head, you're talking about a potentially two-staged personalization approach. One, which is really about what the content tells you can then show by somebody has looked at this and you know that. But then also layering on top of that, if somebody so desires to share information about themselves, things related to their role, where they work, other things around where they are in their career life cycle, for example. And it's just how you kind of balance the two things.
Yeah, exactly. So I think some of the challenge that we see in implementing these things is always like, you're trying to think forward about the kinds of capabilities that you might want to deliver and making sure that there's the underlying enrichment to support it. And that's why an evolving content architecture is always so important, because you have these kind of capabilities now, and you try to foresee the future about what kind of personalization experiences that you can build on top of it. But it'll continue to evolve, so you might need to add to the enrichment that you already have and layer it and continue to layer it and layer it. So I think one of the things that is a lockdown architecture of metadata and keeping it very static and not being able to evolve it easily is probably one of the traps that I would see common, that when people try it, that they might get stuck by not planning for change in the architecture, because it will evolve, and you try to think forward, but there will be new kind of capabilities that we need to plan for that will require new things in the data, more enrichment in the data, and it just needs to be layered as we continue to progress. Yeah.
So I think we've got time for one more question if anybody has one. Otherwise, we'll wrap up. Well, do visit us on the stand. We're on in this hall, 4.2, E18, which is somewhere over in that direction. So come and say hello and enjoy the rest of your fair. Thank you.